Welcome to Spatial Signals. It's a podcast about remote sensing and geospatial science, but more importantly, the people behind it. I'm your co-host, Dr. Brad Shelito, and with me is your other co-host, Mr. Chris McGinty. How are you doing today, Chris?
Doing great, Brad. Really excited to be here and have one of our fantastic guests join us for this podcast.
Excellent. So for those of you who are just joining us, this podcast is sponsored by AmericaView, which is the National Geospatial and Remote Sensing Network, which is dedicated to empowering Earth observation education. Now, AmericaView's been around since 2003 and has grown from a program just in the state of Ohio to a network of programs across the United States that are working with remote sensing, GIS, and geospatial technologies in outreach, research, and education. But beyond all that, at the top of the podcast here, first thing Chris is going to fill us in is a little bit of news that's happening here in the geospatial world.
Yeah. So, Brad, are you familiar with the Landfire project?
Tell me more about this Landfire.
So, Landfire is a joint project between U.S. Forest Service and Department of Interior, and they've been around for 20 years this year, and it's a fantastic program that really looks at mapping fuel loads, land cover, and distribution and possibility of fires across the continental U.S. And if you haven't had a chance to look at the Landfire project, you should go over to the USGS website and take a look at all of the fantastic data they have available. Just an amazing project, and like I said before, 20 years down the road, and they have some incredible new products. So, take some time and go check out Landfire.
Now, is Landfire all going to be available for free to be able to use, or?
Yep. Since 2004, Landfire has been freely available. There are a number of different types of data layers that you can download and use in your research or analysis. One thing I should say, it's largely driven by the Landsat mission and all the different types of data that's been collected by Landsat over the years, and certainly is going to be remaining freely available to the public.
Yeah, it sounds good. And that's part of what we're going to be talking about here today. Some with our guests, all about things remote sensing and landscape related, because our guest today is the one and only Dr. Aaron Maxwell, who's coming to us as the director of West Virginia View. Aaron is currently an associate professor in the Department of Geology and Geography at West Virginia University, and he's also sporting both a master's and a PhD from West Virginia University. So for all things Morgantown, we're going to be talking today with Aaron. So thank you so much for joining us, Aaron.
Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, we're glad to have you here. Now, with all of our guests, the first thing that we kind of want to know is, before we get into, your research and what you're doing, for everybody, we want to know what your origin story is. Everybody comes into GIS, remote sensing, geospatial science in a different way. Frequently when you tell people, I do geospatial technologies, they look at you with a kind of a puzzled, what's that? So of all the different fields that are out there, why this one, Aaron?
Yeah, so I really had no background in GIS, remote sensing, or earth science from high school. For those of you that went to high school in the U.S., that earth science and geography are not generally heavily covered in the high school curriculum. But with that said, I was always really interested in landscapes, specifically like terrain and landforms, and then just mapping. So when I went to college, my original goal was to be a high school chemistry teacher. I worked on that for a couple years, but then kind of decided that I didn't see myself in that role long term. So in undergrad, I ended up finishing degrees in chemistry, biology, and environmental science from Alderson Broaddus, which is a small college in West Virginia. So even in undergrad, I really didn't have a lot of earth science background other than some of the courses I took in my environmental science program. So actually it wasn't until I was a grad student that I really got more involved in GIS and remote sensing. So I came to WVU wanting to study geochemistry. If you're familiar with West Virginia, we have a legacy of mining, surface mining and underground mining, and one of our big environmental issues is acid mine drainage. So I was really interested in that, and I wanted to kind of contribute to acid mine drainage remediation. But I ended up taking a remote sensing class with Dr. Tim Warner, who ended up being my PhD advisor later. And I was like, this is it. This is definitely what I'm interested in.
What was it about?
Oh, sorry.
No, what was it about that really was like, this is the thing I want to do?
Well, I've always been interested in photography and like videography and just imaging. And, and I've always been interested in science. And I never really thought that you could kind of combine both of those things into one discipline. And that's effectively what remote sensing does. So it kind of checked a lot of boxes for me. So yeah, anyway, that's kind of it. It was mainly taking Tim Warner's remote sensing class, and then I ended up kind of shifting gears from geochemistry, over to GIS and remote sensing. And then after finishing my master's degree, I worked as an analyst at the Natural Resource Analysis Center for a few years. It's a research in a mapping lab in the Agricultural College at WVU, and at that point, we were doing a lot of work with mapping mining and mine reclamation in the southern coal fields in West Virginia and the mountaintop mining region specifically. So at that point, actually kind of got more boots on the ground experience working with remotely sensed data and creating things like land cover maps. And then I made the decision to go back and get my PhD and get more involved in kind of the research and teaching aspect of GIS and remote sensing.
And what kind of applications were you doing with mining, remote sensing, boots on the ground? Frequently we hear about mining. You don't think about remote sensing being something that would be connecting with that. But what were you kind of doing with it?
Yeah, so there's a pretty significant amount of landscape change that happens with surface mining. If the listeners aren't familiar with mountaintop mining, it's a really large scale mining process where they effectively excavate the top of mountains with explosives and extract thin coal seams, and then they're left with a lot of like leftover overburden rock that they have to do something with. And based on the Surface Mine Reclamation Act from 1977, legally they have to reclaim the landscape to what's known as approximate original contour. So it should have roughly the same landforms that it did before the mining. But in the southern coal fields, it's been possible to do that because it's too steep down there to actually like reclaim it to a stable slope. So they're able to get amendments basically to that rule where they can actually change the shape of the landscape and make stable slopes. So what they end up doing a lot of the time is taking the leftover rock and placing it in adjacent valleys as what they call a valley fill. So you end up with valley bottoms that are raised up and the mountaintops that are removed effectively. So the amount of like actual land cover change and physical like elevational change is pretty much just unparalleled across the globe. It's a kind of a large scale landscape alteration process that doesn't happen anywhere else. So our work was mainly funded by the EPA because they were interested in like long-term monitoring of these sites in terms of things like ecological impacts and water quality.
Very cool. Well, beyond that, then, after you got through your grad work, working with the mining stuff, then what happened? And then how'd you get into being a faculty member there at West Virginia?
Yeah, so whenever I was working as an analyst, I just started my PhD program, and my undergraduate advisor actually retired, and I applied for his position as just kind of just for the heck of it. And I ended up getting a job offer to go back to Otterson Broaddus to teach. So I ended up there for 4 years, and I finished my PhD while I taught full time there, which if anyone's thinking about doing that, don't do that. It's terrible to have a full-time job while you're trying to finish your PhD.
It's a little from column A, a little from column B, right?
Yeah. So anyway, I taught there for 4 years. I did earth science, geography, GIS courses mainly, finished my PhD, and then unfortunately, Otterson Broaddus actually ended up closing because of financial issues and whatnot. So I ended up moving back to WVU as a teaching faculty, where I mainly taught GIS and remote sensing, web GIS, and digital cartography courses, and then transitioned to a research position a few years later. So now I basically am a research faculty at the university, so I do teaching, research, and service. And then also as part of that, I am the faculty director for the state's GIS Technical Center. So the GIS Tech Center is a state agency effectively that's housed inside of our department. We have currently 6 full-time or staff people, and we're an applied mapping production unit. that does work for the state, but also like funded grant work. So like through that, I get some like hands-on experience, like doing like real like day-to-day like mapping with like mapping professionals that supports the state. So that's another part of like what I do at the university.
Aaron, that's really cool, and we're going to talk a lot more about a couple of different things, but really interested in how you came to be so interested in open source and programming. And I know that we're going to talk more about what you do, but I'm interested at what point in your academic career did you really start engaging in using programming and open source techniques to do your analysis?
Yeah, so to be honest, like I had no background in like coding or programming as an undergrad, or really even as a graduate student. Even when I was working as an analyst, I mainly worked in desktop like software like ArcGIS. And when I started working on my PhD, I was doing a lot of machine learning because that's how we were trying to extract land cover from our imagery. And at that point, like I realized that if I really wanted to be able to design experiments, I had to have more control over the workflow. And to do that, you really have to do it inside of a programming environment. So I actually never really taught any programming or anything at Otterson Broaddus. It wasn't until I came to WVU that I started doing that. The first class I did, which I partially developed with funding from AmericaView, that incorporated coding, was the class called Open Source Spatial Analytics, which is currently still being taught, and I mainly teach it using the R language. And the whole point of that is to teach students the basics of the R language and how to actually do like data science and work with spatial data in R. So we do everything from basic data cleaning, data wrangling, up to like reading in, working with spatial data, making maps, making interactive maps, and then doing like spatial predictive modeling with machine learning. And then since then, like the open source and like kind of ecosystem has really evolved and become even more key and central to geospatial professionals. So we've developed some content through the West Virginia View webpage, and through our courses here at WVU focus on using both Python and R, doing machine learning, doing deep learning, using like PyTorch environment. So I guess the short answer is that I've just found that was the necessary like direction I had to go if I wanted to continue to be active in doing like geospatial predictive modeling work.
Sure. And so any students going into the field now, you would give them what recommendation?
Yeah, so I mean, right now, I feel like if you want to be a geospatial professional, an analyst, a technician, a remote sensing analyst, you could probably get your foot in the door without having programming background or data science background, but it's definitely going to help if you do have it. And I don't think that you need to be somebody who's like, like a programmer first, like that's like your primary skill set. Just having enough background that you can do like basic data manipulation, basic data wrangling, data visualization is enough. Right now, it seems like people are really interested in like Python as a language. That's just really taken off in the data science world. And then R, obviously, to a certain degree too, because it's more of a data-focused language. So I think, in short, I would recommend that if it's worth investing the time, I think it's easier to learn if you apply it to something you're interested in. So if you're already doing GIS or remote sensing work, being able to apply like coding skills or tools to that problem, I think makes it a lot easier to learn than just trying to like program a tic-tac-toe or something. Sure. And then I guess. I think that's probably my main suggestions. And I think the other kind of component of like coding and programming outside of like the data world that is super important right now for geospatial professionals is like the web environment. So a lot of times now we're sharing data via web maps or web apps. So a lot of people use ArcGIS Online. If they get more involved, they may start using the ArcGIS SDK for JavaScript, which is more coding based. But having some skills that are associated with web-based coding or development are super useful. So like HTML, CSS, those skills are pretty easy to learn. JavaScript's a little bit harder, but a little bit can go a long way. So I kind of see two tracks. You kind of have your data coding, which is a lot of Python and R, and then you have your web-based stuff, which is HTML and CSS and JavaScript. And we've developed openly available free materials and all that's available on our West Virginia View website if anybody's interested.
Excellent.
Where do you see people starting with things? Like if somebody's like, you just listed, a half a dozen different, strange sounding programming languages there. What do you recommend people start with first?
I think if you're interested in the data side, I really feel like Python's a good starting point, just because there's a lot of free resources. There's a lot of Python libraries that are specific for working with data or even working with spatial data, and yeah, and I think partially it's the resources are there to learn, and the learning curve is not as steep as like some other maybe more complicated languages like C or C++. If you're interested more in the web environment, I think learning some HTML and CSS is a good place to start. Those languages are very specific. Like HTML is just for building web content, CSS is for styling web content. So they're not like a full-blown programming language. It makes them a lot easier to pick up and learn. How I would do it is if I had a problem, like something you're already doing, like in ArcGIS Pro or the desktop environment, I would take that problem and see if I could figure out how to do it using like Python. So like where you need to get to because you've got there before in a different track or a different method. So you're just trying to figure out a different road to that same endpoint.
So I'm going to ask a bit of a loaded question then, and this is something that's really come up the last year or so, but what about using something like an AI like ChatGPT or something to help facilitate initial code and then learning through that process of iteratively changing the code to meet your needs?
So, obviously with ChatGPT, for those of us that are educators, it's kind of a loaded issue right now. I personally feel that those tools are amazing and very useful, and we can't just ignore them because if you get a job, go out in the workforce, it's going to kind of be expected that you're going to that you're going to use those tools to hopefully make yourself more productive. I've had some people tell me that they think that now, like learning how to code or do data analytics is not necessary because of things like ChatGPT, but I would argue that it's actually, if anything, more important because if you have had any experience trying to get ChatGPT to code for you, it's not super helpful if you don't really understand what it's giving you. So for example, I've recently worked on building an R package to do some geospatial deep learning, and a lot of it was taking Python code that I already had and trying to convert it into R code and wrap it into like a package. And how I built a lot of it was taking my Python code, giving it to ChatGPT, and letting it produce something. And then what would happen 95% of the time is it would generate something that didn't work, but it was actually pretty close to working. But in order to get it to the point where it was functional, I had to actually go in and like edit the code and fix problems or mistakes that it made. And the only way I could really do that was that I actually knew like how to code in R and in Python so I could troubleshoot it. So I think it changes the way that we learn how to code and how we are going to actually use coding on a day-to-day basis. But I feel like you can't really use those tools unless you have a good basic understanding of the language that you're working with so you can troubleshoot it. I think we kind of undervalue ChatGPT in general and similar technologies as like a teaching tool. It's really interesting to like ask it questions and then have it like explain itself to you. Like for example, ChatGPT 4, the more recent iterations, when it produces code, it generally follows it with explanations of it, like a line by line explanation. And I find that that's actually like a great learning resource both for me and for my students to be able to like get some code and actually have it explained to you step by step. And then you could do things like follow up with it, like, well, why did you do this as opposed to this other method? And it might give you a good reason why like it thinks that method A is better than method B, which is maybe the way you thought you should do it.
I think that's right. Also good to make sure that you learn how to document your code. So I'm glad that ChatGPT is doing that. I tend to agree with you. I think it is, an undervalued resource in academia and research in some cases. Example, the other day I was driving to work and plugged my phone in and had a conversation with ChatGPT about a certain solicitation that was out for a project, and it summarized that project, provided me essentially a downloadable document that I could then reference. So I think there's a lot of opportunities in academia for it when used appropriately.
I think one thing people like a pitfall potentially is that it's not necessarily going to be correct when it produces something. But I find that it's always a good second pair of eyes. So for example, right now I've been working on a text with for Elsevier associated with spatial predictive modeling, and I write the whole text myself, but I'm not using ChatGPT to do any of the writing. But I will give it paragraphs and be like, is this factually correct? Did I make an error? And what I find most of the time is that if it said that there was a problem with it, it was actually right, and I could go back and find where I made a mistake and fix it. So the idea is that it's not writing for you, that it's a second set of eyes to double check. And if it tells you something is wrong, then you can always go back and double check to see if it's actually correct that it was wrong. So I find it's a very good research assistant in many ways.
All right, so Aaron, if that's all the stuff you're doing here with West Virginia View, how did you become to be involved with America View? As an organization, everybody comes into it a different way, but how did you end up here?
Yeah, so the original PI or principal investigator for West Virginia View was Dr. Tim Warner, who was my PhD advisor. So whenever I was at Alderson Broaddus teaching there, Tim helped me set up a lab space, partially using funding through America View, and we would work on some of our high impact activities together. Anyway, he was trying to build out the network a bit by getting me involved. And then when I came back to WVU and Tim was in the process of transitioning into retirement, we did kind of a soft handoff over a few years where he was still the PI, but I was pretty actively involved. I would come to the meetings. I would come to our in-person meetings at the USGS. And then whenever he formally retired, I officially took over once it was approved by West Virginia View. And I've been the PI now since 2018, 2019 time period, since Tim has been fully retired. So I guess the short answer is it was kind of a soft transition from Tim, who was my PhD advisor, over to me once Tim retired.
So I guess one thing, Aaron, that I would like to ask, considering West Virginia View, and certainly Dr. Tim Warner was an incredible part of America View and received a Lifetime Achievement Award from the organization in 2020 and has been highly regarded in the remote sensing field. But when you come back to America View a little bit, what has been your sense and your experience within the organization, and what has driven you to continue associating with it and promoting your West Virginia View program? I'd just like to get a feel of your engagement with the organization and why you felt it's been beneficial.
Yeah, so I'm here at West Virginia University. I'm in a department of geology and geography, so it's a mix of hard rock geologists to social scientists. So it's we have a wide variety of people that work in our department. And since there's been some retirements recently, there actually aren't that many people really doing GIS or remote sensing work. So I guess when you're in a geography department, you kind of think that you're going to be working with a lot of people who have a lot of common interests. But I actually kind of feel a lot of times that I'm kind of on my own here a bit, just because I am kind of doing my own thing and there's not a lot of other people doing GIS and remote sensing. So, one of the things I like most about being involved in America View is that I have a network of people that I can bounce ideas off of and talk with that are interested in the same problems or the same types of data that I'm interested in. And also people that teach a lot of the similar courses that I teach at other universities, so that we can compare notes and stuff. So I really love the kind of networking aspect of America View. I think every year we meet in person or as a group, like at one of the state views, the one of the state views hosts, and I look forward to that every year. It's one of my favorite weeks every year, just to catch up with everybody and see everybody, and it's really a great organization just because of the shared interest that people have, and also like that it's not an organization that's purely focused on research or purely focused on teaching or education or outreach. Like I think we do a good job of like making sure we cover all of those bases. So the research that people do, the teaching that people do, the outreach that people do, all of that collectively is I think more powerful than it was purely based on just like doing research on the Landsat sensor, even though that's valuable. Like having the education components I think really adds to the value of the organization.
Yeah, I'd agree. And so after all this, that America View, West Virginia View, an incredible journey for you to get to this point. What's next? What's next in your list of projects and interests, and where do you see yourself going?
Yeah. So I have one of the big kind of the central projects we work on through America View is mainly course development. So I'm started off as teaching faculty, so I have a lot of experience like developing course content, and I just like building course content. So continuing with my West Virginia View work, I want to continue to build and update and maintain the courses that we have. So if you go to our website, which is wvview.org, we have a series of courses available, including Methods in Open Science, which is focused in Python and R, Intro to GIS Science, which is a GIS course focused in ArcGIS Pro, Open Source GIS Science, which is a course focusing open source QGIS software. We have some more advanced courses in digital cartography, web GIS, remote sensing, and then our more coding-based courses, open source spatial analytics, and then geospatial deep learning, which is a new course. So I want to continue to maintain and update those. Some other things that we do on our course or on our website is we do host some code and examples for workflows. We develop data sets that people can download and work with. A lot of those are focused on training or working with deep learning models. We're also pretty active on YouTube. So we have a YouTube channel where we have videos generally short videos focused on some specific geospatial topic or coding topic or something. I think we're over 300 videos overall now, so we're continuing to add to that and build out content on YouTube. What our current big project for the year is funded through West Virginia View is we're trying to take our open source spatial analytics course and turn it into a book. So the goal is to hopefully by fall 2025 have a digital book-based version of that course available with all the associated code and data and whatnot. And then just a couple other projects I'm interested in kind of more broadly, partially through West Virginia View, but also just my work in general. I have a book project currently with Elsevier. The book's titled Supervised Learning in Remote Sensing and Geospatial Science, Theory and Practice. So we're hoping to have a draft of that book in the next 6 months, and it's going to cover a lot of topics that are related to creating and producing spatial models using machine and deep learning methods. I'm hoping in the future to get more people involved in West Virginia View. I mean, right now I'm the primary person, and generally I'll try to fund a grad student or a couple grad students to help with some course development. We're hoping to expand our network a bit and build out more research and content associated with deep learning applied to geospatial data, and we do a lot of work with geomorphic mapping, like landform identification with deep learning, and we're hoping to integrate more of that content into our material.
Very cool, and definitely want to invite people to your website. But I also wanted to point out to folks that are in the workforce, maybe even federal employees, that Aaron and team has developed a module that is on the AmericaView website, www.americaview.org. And you can go there, and it's kind of geared towards the federal employees, folks who might want to learn Python or a little bit of programming. But Aaron's had his hand in a lot of different projects, a lot of different educational materials. So very, very cool.
Yeah, a lot of our courses too, we try to make them very modular. So if you are like just trying to, what you want to do you're interested in something very specific because you have a knowledge gap or something for your current work. A lot of our courses, you can go in and jump into the middle of them and find a topic that you're interested in, and you don't have to work through the whole thing sequentially.
Well, it's a ton of amazing stuff you're doing, Aaron. I have no idea where you find time to actually, sleep and stuff like that when you're doing all of this. But unfortunately, looking at the clock on the wall here, we are running out of time. I really appreciate you taking the time today out of your schedule to meet with us and share all of this information. Where can people find you, and where can people find all of the stuff you've been talking about, your YouTube, your lessons, all of that stuff? Where can people find you online to get a hold of you and all of these great resources?
Yeah, I mean, I primarily work through our website, the West Virginia View website, so that's wvview.org. So it's a multi-page website. We have our courses off on one side, and we have like research and data on one side, and a landing page and some information about myself. All my contact information's on there, including my email address. That's generally the best way to get a hold of me. If you're interested in talking, feel free to email. And on all of our YouTube channel and stuff is also linked to our website. So in short, we're mainly active through our web page, and all of our contacts are listed there.
Oh, awesome. So that's the big place to go to find you there. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Aaron. We really appreciate it.
Cool. Yeah, thanks. I really appreciate it. This was fun.
Thanks, Brad. Thanks, Aaron. This has been an awesome opportunity to be here and record this podcast with Aaron and learn more about his projects in West Virginia View. If our audience would like to learn more about America View, you can go to our website at www.americaview.org and all of our various social media accounts, including X, Facebook's, Instagram. And then we have Spatial Signals on Substack. So if you head over to Substack, you can look up America View, and you'll find our Substack listed there. Brad?
All right. Well, I also want to thank our editor, Matt Wozniak, for making us sound good here today, as well as our theme music comes courtesy of Matthew Maxwell, by no coincidence, who's Aaron's brother. But we'll be back soon with another episode. So until then, I'm Brad Shillito.
And I'm Chris McGinty.
And you keep watching the skies for those spatial signals out there.